Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Dani, and today Crate.com talks with Keith Sonnet, the Chief Executive of Computer Aid. If you haven't heard of it yet, its mission is to bridge the digital divide and to use digital technologies to help overcome disadvantage and to do so in an environmentally friendly ways. Before we begin, as always, remember, if you're new here to this podcast, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. Hi, Keith, and welcome.
Hi, pleased to meet you and great to be on this podcast.
No, we are really happy to have you here, and thank you for taking time to talk to us today. Keith, we believe that this initiative of yours is quite interesting, quite inventive, and quite necessary if we think about it, especially highlighting this bit of being it in an environmentally friendly way. So what has have inspired the creation of Computer Aid, and how has your mission evolved over time to address this digital divide?
Well, we started something like 27 years ago. And if you walked around the streets of London or any main city in the UK, you would see companies having computers thrown into skips, and they would be taken and put into landfill, which is very bad for the environment. So we decided to take the computers that companies no longer required, repurpose them, and make them available to people who couldn't afford to buy them, both in the UK and also in countries around the globe. And by reuse, we reduce the carbon footprint of those computers. And over our 27 years, we think we've saved the equivalent. I think the figure is there's something like 1.3 million trees and so many thousands of cars, the equivalent having taken off the road. So that's what inspired us, helping people in need, but also making use of something that somebody didn't want and giving it to people who do want them.
That is an amazing, amazing number. And it's been quite a long road. So let's talk about what's going on now. What projects do you have running?
We have projects in, of so many. In South Africa, we have 4 or 5 projects running, and they are what we call solar community hubs. We started in about 2010 converting shipping containers into solar-powered computer labs. And the first ones were made for use in schools, and they were sent to Zambia and Zimbabwe and elsewhere. And because they're solar-powered, they're not reliant upon the grid electricity, which so many people don't have access to. And over the years, they have changed to become solar community hubs. So they're converted shipping containers, and they're two together with a space in the middle, which is enclosed, and they provide a range of services for members of the community. So we have one in the Amazon, for example, which I visited last year, and that not only provides IT services, but one of the containers is specifically used for medical purposes, and they're used by visiting doctors and nurses. And when I was there, the doctor told me that just on a very simple level, they were just so helpful, because if a member of the community, and it was a remote community, wanted to get some medical advice, they had to spend 1.5 hours on a canoe going down to the next place where they could see a doctor. And when they got there, he said they had to make an appointment. And if they couldn't see a doctor that day, they had to paddle back for another hour and a half and then paddle back. And now with the internet and the facilities we provide, they can avoid those long unnecessary trips. And also they can order prescriptions online and so on. And there is medical equipment in the container as well. In South Africa, in the Eastern Cape, they provide an internet, a community network for members of the community who can buy vouchers and get access to mobile telephony and also internet access, which is otherwise not available in the Pacific area. So we're always increasing the range of services we provide. The bedrock is IT and giving people access to those computers and that IT equipment, and also the skills and training to use it, but also seeking to provide other services that members of the community value. So we've got a number of those community, what we call solar community hubs in place at the moment. We're developing a couple more in Mexico, and we're going to be producing our first one in New Mexico. It's the first one in North America. In addition to that, we've been putting computer labs into schools and training teachers to improve their IT skills. So just recently, we put 18 computer labs into schools in the Nabasha region, which is north of Nairobi. We'll be doing some more later this year. We've put computer labs in schools in Rwanda, Zimbabwe. We've trained young entrepreneurs in Sierra Leone using digital technology. They'll try and get a job or to become an entrepreneur themselves. And we've run gender-based projects. So at the moment, we're looking to develop. We've got projects we're developing around climate resilience and and um, uh, and farming, and the need for farmers to be able to respond to the effects of climate change on their environments and how they can improve their livelihoods. So we run a lot of projects using IT, um, and we're reliant upon funders. So we're always looking for corporates and trust and foundations and others to provide the funding, because we don't get any independent funding other than what we raise ourselves.
Wow, I'm happy to hear that you're also working here in the Amazon. I'm in Brazil, so
Right.
it's really really interesting to see. And I believe one of the aspects that really usually caught my eye here is understanding the connection that organizations make with the communities, right? Because it's not just about providing a service or providing assistance. It's also about giving them something that's going to be effectively used. By your answers here, we see this potential. We see how it can be profitable for people, for these communities that you're working on. But maybe could you tell us a bit more about how does computer aid ensure that the technology that you guys provide are sustainable and also effectively, as I said, effectively used by these communities?
Before I answer that, just since you're in Brazil, you may be interested to know that we're also working in the one of the southern states, which was badly affected by the floods recently, and so many thousands of people were displaced. And in conjunction with Dell in Brazil, we're setting up communication centers to offset some of the effects of the floods on people's lives. So that's just about taking place. In terms of your question, I'm sorry to diverge.
No, actually, thank you. I would just want to say thank you for the help. It was an absolute disaster, so it's really good
Yes,
to hear people joining hands with us. Thank you so much for that.
yes. And we've done the same in Morocco with the earthquake last September, in just south of in the southern parts of Morocco. And these are sort of like a converted shipping containers into mobile communication centers being used by children because the schools have been damaged and so on. Anyway, getting back to your question, sorry to digress again. Well, first of all, we work with local in-country partners, and so we don't tend to have our own organisations in different countries in which we work. We're not big enough to do that, but also we believe it's important to work with local partners who know their communities, who know the culture, who know the language better than we do. And so we're very reliant upon them. And so we work closely with our local partner to ensure that whatever we do is something the community wants and will value. And so there's a process of consultation with local community members on those types of issues. We don't try and impose our projects upon people. They're generated from the bottom up, and everybody is very keen to get access to computer and the internet. And even though mobile phones are ubiquitous and so many people have mobile phones, there is a lot you can't do on a mobile phone, which you can do on a laptop or a PC. And if you're in a school that has no computers and no internet access, it's very limiting for what you can teach pupils. And in order to become members of the 21st century and to progress and to improve their lives, people need to have IT skills, because it's a key driver for social and economic change, and all employment requires some form of digital skill in one way or another. So they're very much welcomed by local community members, and that's why the services we provide from our community hubs will vary from country to country and from site to site, depending upon what people want. How people use them, I mean, we can't lay down a rule. This equipment must be used in this particular way. If you buy yourself a PC, um, the shop doesn't tell you, or oh, you must use it in this particular way, and you must only use it for these purposes. You're free to use it within bounds for whatever purpose is legal, and that's um, the same with the computers we provide. And I'm very much a supporter of the Amartya Sen approach to development, which is that international development is about providing freedom. And what we're trying to do is to enable people to make choices about how they live their lives in ways in which they have reason to value. And so people will use their computers and the equipment and the training provide in a vast variety of different contexts, and but in ways in which they value. Some years ago, we ran a program in Kenya training nurses, and it reduced the time for training from 5 years to 3 years. But we had somebody, a journalist, visit one of the hospitals where nurses had been trained. And he or she came back, I forget who it was, and said, well, the nurses are not using it for medical purposes. They're using the equipment you provided to send emails and contact friends and others, because we'd given them personal laptops as part of the training, that these weren't this wasn't hospital equipment. And we said, well, they're doing something. They're using the equipment in ways in which they value. They want to keep in touch with family and friends. That's partly the reason why we gave them laptops, not so they could just study for medical degrees or whatever courses that they were using. That they valued having that social interaction with other people, which is very valuable. And also, the access to the internet opens up so many opportunities for others. In Kenya, there's a large refugee camp called Kakuma, and it has I'm told it was called, um, it means nowhere, and people are not really easily able to leave. And there was a young woman there who was given a laptop and training how to use it, and she had internet access, and she's very successful. She took an online degree and obtained her online degree, and she was studying for further degrees as well in a very disadvantaged area. And when she was interviewed, she said, I've lived for so many years nowhere, but now I have 2,000 friends on Facebook who I communicate with all the time. And so it opened up her opportunities through technology, through internet connectivity, and through having the skills and training to use it. So she improved her life, even though she was living in a very disadvantaged part of the world.
I think this is absolutely necessary to look at
Yeah.
technology as ways to improve our lives, and even little things on the small things. I believe we
Yeah.
being able to have this conversation now, the whole thing that was this podcast since the pandemic, it's about us. It's about making good use of technology in creative ways, in
Yes.
positive ways. Keith, now looking at this whole operation that you have set, as you said, you were acting in very different locations, and sometimes you're providing, let's call it emergency or urgent help. If we think about the case of South Brazil or Morocco, I believe that this comes with challenges, especially sourcing, and distributing technology. So what would you say there are the key challenges that computer aid faces, and how do you overcome these obstacles?
Well, computer aid has two key functions. First of all, we get computers from companies and other organizations which we repurpose for reuse. And the second part of what we do is we create and develop projects like our Solar Community Hub projects. And those projects we seek funding for. And so when we get the funding, we can run the project and we can provide the computers, the training. It's all covered by the funder. The first part, getting the computers, we never get enough. And we work with companies, large and small in the UK, but not just in the UK. We also collect and have refurbished computers in many countries throughout the world. We do that through a network of partner organisations. But the key problem for us in getting the computers we want is, first of all, most organisations, most companies have been disposing of their unwanted equipment for many years, and they have already entered into contracts with other, commercial refurbishers that works okay for them, and they don't really want to change it. So that's the problem, is getting through that inertia. Secondly, particularly with the large organisations, it's getting to the decision makers, the people who can understand the arguments about why they should use computer aid, because we do exactly what a commercial refurbisher does. We collect IT equipment and we refurbish it for reuse. We can help achieve companies' environmental objectives through reuse, and we can give them information, which we do, about the carbon saved by through reuse. But a commercial refurbisher can do that as well as we do, because they sell their equipment for reuse. But what we can also help companies with is social value, because we don't sell the equipment that are donated to us by companies. We only provide them we only seek to cover our costs, and we give them to people who are disadvantaged. So we create social value through our IT disposal service. So we help companies have a professional IT disposal service that is second to none, that we can help meet their environmental objectives and also social value objectives. So getting to the right decision makers that understand the connections between the three different objectives is important. Then the third major issue is that big organizations like government departments often, and big companies, wrap all their services up into a big contract. So not only do they dispose of their IT service, but they want the company who takes the equipment away to provide new equipment. They want the equipment taken away to be sold and used to subsidize the new equipment. They want a maintenance contract for that equipment. They want a 24-hour phone-in service. So a member of staff gets a problem with the computer, they just phone up and and the maintenance company can get remote access and so on. So they're very, very large contracts. And there is no way that computer aid of our size is able to, to bid for contracts like that, because we can't provide that range of services. They're only available to very large companies with the resource to do it. So those are three key problems and challenges in getting equipment. In terms of distributing the equipment, particularly in overseas countries, there are often high import duties that are imposed by governments, customs duties. There's often lots of regulations that has to be followed. In some countries, the equipment has to be inspected. In the UK, we have to pay a registered company to come and inspect the equipment before it's shipped somewhere. And so there are a lot of problems in terms of shipping to the countries we work in. So it's not always easy. Plus, there's a cost involved in doing so.
Now, having this great perspective of how things are working and operating and these challenges, I want to change the tone a little and look at the future. So what are you guys planning ahead? What are your next goals, maybe your next steps?
Well, our next steps are that we want to have a greater impact than we do at the moment. I mean, we can, as I've said, like schools, we put computer labs into 18 schools in the Naivasha region of Kenya, and we have a track record of doing it. And there are so many schools in so many countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, that has no access to digital technology, don't have access to the internet, and often they don't have reliable energy connections. And we can take our experience from 18 schools. We could do 200 schools. We could do 250 schools. But it's actually but in order to do that, we need support from bigger funders like institutional investors and others, which is very difficult. So my goal for computer aid is that we need to develop away from being the size we are, doing and use our experience and resources to actually spread the technology we're using in a much more a substantial way than we currently are. But it takes funding to do it because it's not it doesn't come it doesn't come free. Um, but the our overall mission, I think you said at the beginning, is to bridge the digital divide, and it's not getting any smaller, despite all our best efforts. In fact, the World Economic Forum's global IT report 2 or 3 years ago said it's getting wider. If you look at developments in digital technology, particularly with artificial intelligence and AI, which so many digital companies are now promoting, it's the insane. That's all very good in the Western world, but if you're in sub-Saharan Africa, you don't even have a computer, and you don't even have access to Word or PowerPoint or any equivalent software. It's meaningless. And so that AI is going to drive so many more innovations and so many more changes to people's lives. And I fear that people who continue to lack access to skills will fall increasingly behind. I hope that AI may be able to help that, but I'm not sure that it will easily be able to do so because at the end of the day, people do need devices and they do need training. But I know that AI can help in terms of the training, and you can have virtual assistants to help people train, and the software can help them train. But I visited some computer labs that had been set up in schools in Ethiopia, in the Amara region, which in 20 different schools. And I visited some of the training days for the teachers, because we train the teachers, not the children, because you leave a lasting legacy and they can train the students. And it was quite informative because of one of the classes, in fact, all the classes, most of the teachers tended to be middle-aged. None of them had ever used a computer. Only one or two of the younger ones had. And in one of the training sessions, a middle-aged teacher put his hand up to ask a question, and the facilitator said yes. And he said, "What's the question mark for in the top right-hand corner?" Um, which is the help button. It's simple things like that. That so people, so often in the situations we work, people need a very elementary level of understanding, which is why we teach, amongst other things, computer essentials, how to use a computer, and then you develop it from that and onto online essentials and so security and so on. But you have to start very basically on a very basic level and develop those key competencies so that people can progress on to higher levels. So obviously, in primary schools, you don't teach the same level as you do in secondary schools. Hence our emphasis on coding and robotics in some of the projects that we're running.
I really appreciate you bringing this contrast for the interview. I think sometimes we take things for granted and we forget that different people experience reality in different ways and have access to different materials, and sometimes will need a different approach to things. So
Yes.
yeah, it's vital to see this context that you are working with. And Keith, you mentioned funding, right? This is another cornerstone of this podcast here because we are all about spreading the word about great organizations such as yours, so we can help them keep going, doing wonderful work there you guys are doing. So for our listeners, and maybe some companies that might be listening to us right now, what would be the best ways to help you guys in this mission?
Well, first of all, they can use their social media presences to follow computer age social media posts and to you know um, broadcast us amongst their audiences. They can, if they work for companies, they can raise with their companies the issue of repurposing and reuse of redundant IT equipment that they no longer want. And even if, obviously in the UK, we collect it ourselves, but in other countries, we work through a network of partners that are dedicated to maintaining data security, which is so important for most companies. They can fundraise for us. They can adopt a project. There are so many different ways that they can do it. They can find ways on our website, which is www.computeraid.org. And there's a button at the top on the menu, which is support us. And there are different ways in which people can support us.
That's amazing. And we're going to definitely add the link to you guys on the description here of the episode, so no one will have an excuse to not access it.
Okay.
And especially, you can have more information about what we have been talking here. You can see more about the programs, about the projects, and especially get in touch. All right? Keith,
Yes.
thank you so very much for joining this conversation today. This was really necessary.
Okay, well, it's very good to meet you, and thank you. Goodbye. Bye.
It was a pleasure. To everyone listening to us right now, thank you so much for staying. And, well, get in touch, spread the word, share on the social media, share with your family, with your friends, anyone that can profit from this conversation, so then we can spread the word about the importance of computer aid. Bye, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.